So, moving on to part 3 of chapter 6, lecture notes with it. So, we're going to talk about overloading a method. If you recall, you can overload a method based off, you could have the same method names, but the signature has to be different. So, let me give you, for example, 2 or more methods in the same class can have the same name. However, the parameter meaning the signature, okay? So this is the parameter you're talking about, and this is the data type that's different. Note the name, it's the same. Square, square, okay? But the data type's different. So I don't have to go over the overloading demo. It's a very similar one that we're going to talk about with it. But overloading methods, Java uses a signature, the name of the parameter, or excuse me. So going back to the signature with it, so your parameter could be in different order sequence. You could different data type, different identifiers as what you come across. You need to know this because this is very similar to overloading any functions with it, so it's overloaded. The other key part I want you to know is binding. This is a test question that I will ask you, so make sure you know this process is called binding. The return type of the method is not part of the signature with it, so whatever's returned is not a part of it. So feel free to look at pay and weekly pay example on your own with it. Let's move on to overload constructors. The class constructor is also, constructors are also methods too. But the class constructor is what's normally we call in chapter 3 that when you initialize the field with that particular value to start out with it. So this means that you can overload the constructor because constructors are method as well. Overloading a constructor uses the programmer more than just one way of constructing an object at class. All the previous restrictions on the overloading applies to constructor as well. Look up the both of these are in your book, the rectangle and the 2 rectangle.java with it. It's pretty much self-explanatory. When I talked about the next one is the revisiting the default constructor with this thing. So as you know, that first method that's in your class, that's going to be the default constructor with it. Java automatically provides, and this is from the same slide I took from chapter 3. Java automatically provides a default constructor for the class if the constructor is not explicitly written. The default constructor provides. So you need to know this. All the fields are going to be set to 0. All the chars will set to empty char. All the reference instance will set to null, and the boolean will set to false with it. So this is just by default with it. And you need to know this for the test as well. We as programmer can provide no arg constructor. This is a constructor that accepts no argument. So if a constructor accepts an argument is written, it should be written as no arg constructor. If we write a no arg constructor, we should provide the initialization for all fields. So this is an important constructor as well. Let me move on to the inventory item. This is the one that's in your book with it. So this is the overloading of the constructor. Look, the signature is different, right? Every one of these signatures is different with it. So the string D, but you have an int u here. This one you don't have anything in here. So you have basically three constructors with different signatures. Okay. Next one I want to talk to you about is passing the object as argument. You can pass an entire object as an argument. The object of this can be passed as the method as an argument. Think of I always like to use this analogy that you wear a shirt, and when you have a long sleeve, you wear a sweater outside that shirt. So the object inside of that shirt, let's say it's your arm, and that particular shirt is passed inside of that sleeve of that jacket. So it's kind of like a double layer. So Java pass all argument by value. Okay. when an object is passed as an argument, the value of the reference is passed. The value of the argument reference variable is passed. Now, if you recall, the value reference variable is an address of that memory, object of that memory. If you recall, in 1436 we did that little ampersand next to that that data type. Okay, a copy of that object is not being passed, just the pointer of that object. That's important. So, very important bullets here. When a method receives a reference variable as an argument, it is possible for the method to modify the content with a reference parameter with this thing. So feel free to look at these three examples that we have here as well with it. But here is a great slide that demonstrates that what I just talked to you about. So here's a rectangular, and you have the two parameters that you have, length and width in this thing. Well, it has the memory address. Remember, it passed by value with it, going back to this thing, and it has a reference variable is passed. So this has a reference, meaning the memory address of this thing that's being passed in this thing right now with it. All right. So this R right here, which is the reference of the rectangular of this is the class that's being passed, right? And it's passing with the length and the width stored into this R. So when you do the R method, you can do the get length and the get width from this class right here. So you can do the get from any one of these things right here in here as well. So it's one of those things that you can access that particular objects once you can actually access the rectangular objects with as well. Then we go on to this next slide. Is here's that memory address that's trying to depict here. It's returning a new item is the D and the U. Of course, it's returning as the reading is the memory address with this, and it has the description of the pliers and the units with this, and the inventory objects with this, and this is what's assigned to the item. So the key thing is when you look at how do you look at passing an item, passing an object to another object, is it's a reference parameter, and the key, this is an important slide right here, is for you to understand that it's passing as an argument. The value reference variable is passed. The value reference variable is an address. It's an address. Remember that. I'm going to ask you one of these things right here, okay? Java pass all arguments by value with it. Let me take you to toStrings with it. The toString method of class can be called explicitly. Now you can call it explicitly because it's really nice for you to actually for example, XYZ company stocks. You have a class that's called stocks, and you can pass across the name of it and the value of that stock with it. But look at this, toString. You can actually call, this is what I'm talking about calling explicitly with this thing. So this XYZ company is this. Okay, and this is how you call it toString. So this is explicitly calling. However, toString method do not have to be called explicitly, but it is called implicitly whenever you pass an object to the class of print or toPrint. Okay, print line or toPrint. So, for example, so this is what's called implied and explicit. Now, just to give you some, those of you that are not clear on what is implied and what is implicitly and what is explicitly. So if I said, Joe, go close the door, I mean, I'm looking at Joe and I said, Joe, go close the door. If I look at Sally and I didn't say anything, I said, close the door. So that's an implied, okay, and communication wise with it. To call something to print with a toString, you have to call it explicitly, but it is called implicitly whenever you pass an object. That's very important. All right. So in this next case, we're looking at toString is also called implicit when you concatenate an object to a concatenate means this. So you have to actually call it to pass across the stock company XYZ stock company in this case with it. Okay. So again, all objects to have a toString that returns the class name and the hash of the memory address of the object. We can override the default method without being printed in use for information. Take a look at both of these programs, stock and stock demo 1 in your book. They'll actually talk more about it, okay?